Hi, and welcome to the very first show of the Book Cellar of 2018. Happy New Year! I'm your host and book lover of all categories, Jessica Gillen. And this show is brought to you by Eventide Entertainment. Hi, and thank you for joining me on this show on a wonderful Sunday morning. Oh, I feel so tired but excited. I don't know. I guess that's how my first chunk of the new year is starting, is a little groggy. I recently just moved into my new house, coming right back from vacation, so I've been kind of busy doing all that stuff. So with that said, I have to be a little honest with you. I didn't read all of my books for December. I know. You should have some boo noises right now. But life happens, and it is hard to find time to sit down and read. I'm not going to say I get distracted easily, but I didn't think ahead enough. You know, going to visit my friends and family in Washington for 3 weeks, I thought in my head, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to have so much spare time to read, and it's going to be relaxing. I'll probably even be able to read more books, and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, no, didn't happen. And the one book that I didn't get to was actually the one I was most excited to read for the month of December. So funny how that works out. But I just had a lot of things to do with my friends and my family, and by the time I had time to read, I was usually passing out and going to bed. So with that said, the one book that I didn't get to was Mindhunter by Johnny Douglas. Big sigh, but we're going to push that book into January, and I'm going to read it this month. I promise you that. I actually only have 4 books I'm going to be reading this month because one of them is quite chunky. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who listened to my episodes in December. I had 2 episodes with 3 of my closest friends in Washington. Elena, Sleeper, and I did A Shiver of Snow and Sky, which was our young adult book. If you haven't checked that out yet, that was a great interview. We did really well at reviewing that book. We came from 2 similar but different perspectives, as I didn't really enjoy the book as much as she did. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. It's probably one of the better book reviews I've done. And it was with Elena, and she was awesome. I loved having her on the show. That was followed by A Girl on the Train, which was our book to movie adaptation. And I reviewed that with Alex Galvin and Danielle Scribner. They did not read the book, however. They watched the movie. Like I said, life happens. Sometimes people don't have the time to read. And, oh, Polly, not right now. My cat is telling me enough. So make sure to check out that review too. They kind of came from the perspective of just watching the movie, and I came in with watching the movie and reading the book. I actually really enjoyed the movie. I'm surprised at how terrible that did as far as ratings went. So with that said, I hope you can forgive me for not getting around to all of my books for December. But I'm really hoping that January will kind of bring a lot more reading and book love into my life. So with that said, let's talk about the books that I chose for the month of January. The first one is our true crime category, which is Mindhunter, what I was supposed to read last month. I will read it this month. I'm more than excited to read this. I love the show on Netflix, so if it's based on this book, I'm going to love it, especially since it's coming from somebody that interviewed all these different serial killers and kind of catapulted and began the research of behavioral science that is very popular in FBI crime unit today, especially since they got to interview serial killers. Super interesting. Next is the young adult category. The book for that category is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Sequel is set to be released in May of this year, which means that this book is not even a year old yet. And it has been one that I've wanted to read for months now. And finally, I'm putting it on my list. I'm getting it done this month. And I have a feeling it's going to be one of those books that I just rip right through. It has a very interesting concept. Are you done talking to me, Apollo? Okay. So let's talk about the synopsis for that book. Scarlet Dragna has never left the tiny island where she and her sister Tella live with their powerful and cruel father. Now, Scarlet's father has arranged a marriage for her, and Scarlet thinks her dreams of seeing Caraval, the faraway, once-a-year performance where the audience participates in the show, are over. But this year, Scarlet's long-dreamt-of invitation finally arrives. With the help of a mysterious sailor, Tella whisks Scarlet away to the show. Only, as soon as they arrive, Tella is kidnapped by Caraval's mastermind organizer, Legend. It turns out that this season's Caraval revolves around Tella, and whoever finds her first is the winner. Scarlet has been told that everything that happens during Caraval is only an elaborate performance. Nevertheless, she becomes immersed in a game of love, heartbreak, and magic. And where Caraval is real or not, Scarlet must find Tella before the 5 nights of the game are over, or a dangerous domino effect of consequences will be set off and her beloved sister will disappear forever. So we kind of have some fantasy aspects in there, mystery aspects in there, and also circus/carnival. Super interesting. I'm hoping there's a lot of detail as far as what this Caraval looks like. I've heard great things about this book. People are super excited to read the sequel, and this is one that I've probably looked at bookstores multiple times and been like, yeah, I've read the first chapter before and been completely engaged in the writing. So that's why I say I think I'm going to blow through that one probably within a day or two. So next is the adult fantasy category, and this book is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So if you notice, I have 2 books this month that are about like circuses or carnivals, kind of that element of beauty and mystery and intrigue. Well, this book is no different. The only difference is I have read this. It came out in 2011, and that's when I read it. I read it when it first came out and absolutely loved it. It has been one of my favorite books of all time. Mind you, I have never read it again. I only read it that one time. So I don't remember, 100% all the details. I remember the beginning, I remember the ending, but how it gets to that ending was amazing. It's very detail-orientated. It's written some of the best writing I've seen in an adult fantasy book in a very long time. I loved this book, so I'm kind of excited to kind of come from a 7-year difference perspective. I've grown as a reader and as a person, so hopefully I'll still love it as much as I did. So with that said, let's talk about the synopsis. The circus arrives without warning. No announcements precede it. It is simply there, when yesterday it was not. Within the black and white striped canvas tents is an utterly unique experience full of breathtaking amazements. It is called Le Cirque des Rêves, and it only is open at night. But behind the scenes, a fierce competition is underway. A duel between 2 young magicians, Celia and Marco, who have been trained since childhood expressively for this purpose by their instructors. Unbeknownst to them, this is a game in which only one can be left standing, and the circus is but the stage for a remarkable battle of imagination and will. Despite themselves, however, Celia and Marco tumble headfirst into love, a deep, magical love that makes the lights flicker and the room grow warm whenever they so much as brush hands. True love or not, the game must play out, and the fates of everyone involved, from the cast of extraordinary circus performers to the patrons hang in the balance, suspended as precariously as the daring acrobats overhead. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read this again. It was so good. Make sure you check it out on Goodreads. A lot of people enjoyed this book a lot, but then, people that don't like detail-heavy writing are not going to be big fans of this. It is very detail-orientated. However, the difference is there's quite a bit of dialogue, so it does break up, and the book itself is beautiful. Ugh. I've heard that this book is in talks of becoming a movie, but, it's been 7 years. I haven't heard anything else other than it's, the rights of the book have been bought. But then again, sometimes it takes a really long time for books to be made into movies or TV shows, so who knows? So last is our book to movie/TV show adaptation. And this month I am reading Outlander by Deanna Gabaldon. So, this book is thick. It's Game of Thrones thick. It's huge. So, that's why I only want to put myself into reading 4 books. 2 of them, which I know I'll rip through pretty quickly. The Night Circus and Outlander, I know it's going to take me a little bit more time, especially Outlander. I've heard it's very detail heavy, and kind of difficult to read at times, kind of like Game of Thrones for some people. Although for me, I was immediately captivated by Game of Thrones. So, I don't know. And I've also heard that George R. R. Martin is a huge fan of the Outlander series. Another incentive for me to read it. That said, I've also seen season 1 of Outlander, which is on Starz for those of you that are interested. Currently, it just finished its 3rd season in early December, and season 4 is set to be released this fall. So, with that said, I have watched season 1, which is what Outlander, the first book, is based on. Now, mind you, there's some pretty interesting, I don't want to give anything away because I did watch the show, but there's a certain scene that I'm not really looking forward to reading, but I think it might make it less traumatic. Because when I watched that season and that thing that I don't want to tell you about happened, it was scarring. I couldn't watch the next episode until like a week later because I had to process so much of what happened. But it was a great show. I was very much enthused, captivated. I talked to a lot of my friends who watched it. I actually got my boyfriend into watching it. So if I can get my boyfriend into watching a show, it's pretty good. He's pretty picky. But yeah. So I haven't watched the rest of this show yet because I do want to read the book. So here we are. So let's talk about the synopsis. The year is 1945. Claire Randall, a former combat nurse, is back from the war and reunited with her husband on a second honeymoon when she walks through a standing stone in one of the ancient circles that dot the British Isles. Suddenly, she is an outlander, in Scotland, torn by war and raiding border clans in the year of our Lord, 1743. That's right, she jumped back in time like a lot. Like 200 years, dang. Hurled back in time by forces she could not understand, Claire is catapulted into the intrigues of the lards and spies that may threaten her life and shatter her heart. For here, James Fraser, a gallant young Scots warrior, shows her a love so absolute that Claire becomes a woman torn between fidelity and desire, and between 2 vastly different men in 2 irreconcilable lives. So she does kind of go back and forth in time from what I'm hearing, although mostly in book 1 is set in this setting. Yeah, the show is on Starz, so keep in mind that this is a rated MMA, very mature show, It's definitely not like another Starz show, which I liked a lot, Spartacus. Spartacus was great, but it doesn't have that level of sexual tension and scenes. It's a lot less, but it still is very gory, and I would definitely say it is one of those shows not meant for everyone, because it does have some parts in the show that are a little bit difficult to watch, especially if you kind of get affected by those things easily. However, it is amazing. I loved it. I'm excited to read this book. I've had a friend in college that was obsessed with this series, so, and we really bonded over our book choices. We were very similar. So if she loved this series, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to love it too. We're pretty similar in that sense. So before we talk about the books that are releasing for January, we're going to take a quick break. So make sure to stay tuned and hear about all that Eventide Entertainment has to offer you.
You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company.
Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes.
Nothing brings people together quite like the movies, and every week Aaron Lopez wants you to join him in a discussion about the latest and greatest in the world of film. So grab a drink, grab some popcorn, and get comfy. Come join Aaron and friends every Thursday at The Drive-In, presented by Eventide Entertainment.
Welcome back. Thank you for listening to all of Eventide's Entertainment's offerings. We got some pretty awesome shows here, whether you like movie reviews or video game reviews, also a comedy show and music show. We even have a talk show. Like, we encompass all of it. So make sure to check the other shows out if you enjoy this one. But with that said, let's jump into the January book releases of this month. Now, there's a lot of book releases in January. I didn't realize this when, I was doing my first show in December. I was like, holy cow, there's so many in January. How am I going to be able to tell everybody about these? So I decided to kind of narrow it down to the ones I was most excited for. There's 3 young adult. One of them is kind of in between. And then the other ones are adult. So hopefully I kind of mixed in a little bit of genres in there for you. So with that said, let's talk about the releases for this month. First is Iron Gold, which is book 4 of the Red Rising Saga by Pierce Brown. This releases January 16th, 2018, and is a series I've heard nonstop things about. YouTube, Goodreads, through my friends. I've heard it everywhere. I've even heard that this is going to be picked up as a TV show. So with that said, I have not personally read this series. I do, however, have the first book. I'm one of those people that if it's a series, I really don't like to read it unless there's a lot of books out. Sometimes, I make the mistake by reading a book and realizing that it's a series and being like, damn it, now I'm like hooked and I have to wait a year for them to release. But I guess that's the woes of reading. We have to wait a year. Sometimes, let's think about it. George R. R. Martin, Winds of Winter. We're going on, 6 years without another book, and every year it just gets harder and harder. So, with that said, book 4 of Red Rising is supposed to be a dystopian book. I've heard great things about this author. And the thing is, because this is book 4, I don't want to give you or myself any spoilers as far as what goes on with the story. So I'm going to kind of talk about what happened in the first book, or at least the setting, not what happened. So this is a story, I guess, of a young husband, naive in many ways, He turns kind of like into a bitter man because some loss and desire in his life for vengeance. So I'm not really sure what happens there. I'm guessing something to do with maybe someone he loves. So this is set on a colony on Mars. The main character's name is Darrow, and apparently he discovers that his entire existence is a lie. He thought he had been mining underground to prepare Mars for terraforming, but that happened so long ago, and he actually finds out that him and his other co-workers are actually castes of Reds and are kept as mining slaves in a caste-driven society. So rebels are the ones that actually bring him up to speed and show him kind of opens his eyes to things that he was blinded on. So that's all I'm going to say. Again, I haven't read this. It's book 4. I don't want to really spoil it for people, but there are people that are super into this series. So I wanted to let you guys know that book 4 is out this month. So if it does sound interesting to you, if you like that science fiction stuff, the planets and stars and dystopian, as well as having a male author and male protagonist, this might be the book for you. So make sure to check that out. Next is Thunderhead, book 2 of Arc of a Scythe by Neal Shusterman. The release is January 9th, 2018. I am so excited for this book. I can't wait. I read book 1 in October. I actually reviewed that on my show. It was one of my first reviews. I believe it was my second review for this show. And I loved that book. It was amazing. Now, mind you, I'm a huge Neal Shusterman fan, and he knows how to world build. And Scythe was no different. So the fact that book 2 is out, I am so ready. But I'm so mad at myself because it's book 2. And for those of you that are familiar with the writing process of a trilogy, book 2 is always one of the best books, but also incredibly fast-paced and leaves on a terrible cliffhanger that'll make you cry, basically. Or, not cry as in something bad happened, but cry in frustration because you have to wait until the next book comes out, which will be a year to a year and a half. For instance, Scythe came out, I want to say, October of 2016. With that said, this book, Thunderhead, isn't coming out until almost a year and a half after. Yikes. That's crazy. So, yes, I'm excited for it, but I'm really upset that I'm going to be upset at the end of book 2. But make sure to check it out. If you like Neal Shusterman or you've read Unwind, his other dystopian novel, check this out. It was so good. Make sure to check out my podcast review of it too. I was very pleasantly surprised. Next, we have The Immortalists by Chloe Benjamin. This is released on January 9th, 2018, and it is the adult fiction fantasy category. I haven't heard very much about this, but when I was looking at Amazon's bestseller list, this was one of them that people are pre-ordering a lot, but surprisingly, I haven't heard too much talk about this on Goodreads, so just a little bit of growth and movement on Amazon, to the point where people are pre-ordering this, and it is a standalone, as far as I know, right now. This is book 1, possibly standalone, who knows though. So, with that said, let's jump into the synopsis. If you were told the date of your death, how would it shape your present? It's 1969 in New York City's Lower East Side, and word has spread of the arrival of a mystical woman, a traveling psychic who claims to be able to tell anyone the day they will die. The Gold Children, 4 adolescents on the cusp of self-awareness, sneak out to hear their fortunes. Their prophecies inform their next 5 decades. Golden boy Simon escapes to the West Coast, searching for love in 80s San Francisco. Dreamy Clara becomes a Las Vegas magician, obsessed with blurring reality and fantasy. Eldest son Daniel seeks security as an army doctor post 9/11, hoping to control fate. And bookish Vera throws herself into longevity research, where she tests the boundary between science and immortality. So that sounds pretty interesting. This concept reminds me of like an episode of The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror. So that's kind of interesting because I love those shows. I think not only fantasy, it has to have a mystery element, because I don't think that they're going to tell us right up front when they're going to know they're going to die. If it's going to be dragged out. The cover for this is beautiful. Definitely one I want to check out. But I think I'm going to wait for my library to get it. Just because I don't know the author. So I don't want to commit. I kind of have a fear of commitment sometimes. All right, next we have a brief little graphic novel that's coming out. This is Wires and Nerves, Volume 2, Gone Rogue by Marissa Meyer. The release is January 30th, 2018. And this is actually the graphic novel series based on the Lunar Chronicles. I've read the first book, Cinder. There's like 4 books out, I believe, in this series. Very, very, very popular book series on Goodreads in the YA category. I've heard very good things about this graphic novel too, that the illustrations are very well done, and it actually is a way for people to get into the Lunar Chronicles series that isn't too sure about how they feel about the concept, since the Lunar Chronicles is based on like fairy tales, but written in a science fiction dystopian way. So for instance, Cinder is actually Cinderella, and Cinder is a robot, or a person, mostly a girl, with robot parts. So I guess she's like 50-50. But I won't tell you too much. So this graphic novel is Volume 2. I'm guessing it's still going to kind of go over the story of Cinder, just because I think graphic novels, they tend to take a lot of time to finish one book. Walking Dead kind of, if you notice, if you watch the show, you'll notice that like so many of the comics take up just one season. So I think it's going to be quite a long time before we get all of the graphic novel volumes for this. All right, next we have The English Wife by Lauren Willig. Release date January 9th, 2018. This is adult historical fiction with mystery elements. I love myself some some historical novels. I've read quite a few and I've enjoyed them. This, however, it sounds like the setting is historical fiction, but it's really a mystery novel. So that's kind of interesting. With that said, let's jump in. Annabelle and Bayard van Duvel live a charmed life. He's the scion of an old Knickerbocker family. She grew up in a Tudor manor in England. They had a whirlwind romance in London. They have a 3-year-old twins on whom they dote, and he's recreated her family home on the banks of the Hudson and renamed it Illyria, maybe. Yes, there are rumors that she's having an affair with an architect, but rumors are rumors, and people will gossip. But then Bayard is found dead with a knife in his chest on the night of their 12th night ball. Annabelle goes missing, presumed drowned, and the papers go mad. Bay's sister, Jeannie, forms an unlikely alliance with a reporter to uncover the truth, convinced that Bay would never have killed his wife, that it must be a third party. But the more she learns about her brother and his wife, the more everything she thought she knew about them starts to unravel. Who were her brother and his wife, really? And why did her brother die with the name George on his lips? So, again, I think it's a historical fiction setting, but it's a mystery novel. Just the synopsis alone, the first thought that comes through my head is, what happened to the twins? Where are they? Hopefully we'll find that out pretty soon in the book. But it does sound interesting. I do like historical fiction. I love history books. I do enjoy dry history books, but I also love the historical fiction where they kind of take a concept or a time period and kind of expand on it, but in a fantasy kind of way. And this one sounds like they're doing a mysterious kind of vibe with it. I kind of have some ideas, though, already as to what happened. But who knows? I think this is also going to be one I check out at my library. But it does sound very good. Last but not least, this is one I've heard tons, and I mean tons and tons and tons of stuff about. It's just released. It's called Everless by Sara, Holland. It released January 2nd, 2018. And this is a young adult fantasy. I've heard so much about this. It's all over Goodreads. People cannot stop talking about this book. Apparently has a concept that has not been, I guess, pounded into YA. Like, dystopian novels are kind of all over the place in YA, and they have for a while. This one is not that. So with that said, let's go into the synopsis. In the kingdom of Sempera, time is currency, extracted from blood, bound to iron, and consumed to add time to one's own lifespan. The rich, like the Girlings, tax the poor to the hilt, extending their own lives by centuries. No one resents the Girlings more than Jules Ember. A decade ago, she and her father were servants of the Everless, the Girlings' estate, until a fateful accident forced them to flee in the dead of night. When Jules discovers that her father is dying, she knows that she must return to Everless to earn more time for him before she loses him forever. But going back to Everless brings more danger and temptation than Jules could have ever imagined. Soon, she's caught in a tangle of violent secrets and finds her heart torn between two people she thought she'd never see again. Her decisions have the power to change her fate and the fate of time itself. So what intrigued me most about this book is the concept of time as currency, that instead of taxing people for money, that it's actually you're taxing them for time so you can extend your own life. And the thought of working yourself to the bone just to be able to get more time out of your life is interesting, because then do people really want to that are stuck in slavery or in these really poor towns, are they really wanting to work their whole lives just to work some more? I mean, what's the point of getting more time with currency if that just means that you're going to keep working so the bad people or the really rich people can live longer? So that's kind of interesting. Not something I've ever heard about. It is very intriguing to me, and I hope it intrigued you too. All right, so that was our first show of the month. I haven't heard any news in the book adaptation world, just a little bit of what I gave you through the episode. But if any of the books that I mentioned interest you, let me know what you think. And make sure to post comments or find me on Goodreads. All that info on how to find me is posted below. However, I've also created a new email just for you to be able to contact me. That is thebookseller21@gmail.com. So make sure to send me your book recommendations, thoughts, critiques, or if you just want someone to talk about books. I could always use more people to talk about books. I would love one day if I could have like a book club and we could read it all together and ask questions. And I want to have more guests on my show. That was actually a lot of fun to have Elena Sleeper on my show and Alex and Danielle. I had a lot of fun recording those. So I would love to be able to include my listeners in this show as well. We need to really get people excited about reading again. So I hope you have a happy new year, and thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.